is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ebola outbreak reaches major city in the DRC, renewing calls for increased funding. Uganda struggles with an influx of refugees from the eastern DRC. And global hunger continues to rise. That's according to the latest report by the United Nations. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, Zimbabweans decry the rising cost of living in the country after the rate of inflation doubled in June. And in sports, the video assistant referee makes a debut at the Africa Cup of Nations with no major complaints so far. Let's start in Nigeria, where a two-story building has collapsed at the Delimi community in the Jos North local government area of Plateau State. Police have confirmed 3 deaths and 7 others injured. There is no official cause for the incident. According to a deputy superintendent, the police recovered a distress call around 5 p.m. on Monday. A search and rescue team was immediately mobilized to the scene of the incident. Well, let's now cross over to CGTN Samson Omale. He's joining me on the line from Jos. Samson, can you give us an update on that incident and the ongoing rescue and recovery efforts?
All right. I was at the scene of the rescue operations early this morning, and excavators have been moved to site. We had one yesterday. There were 2 this morning, just trying to see how much they can excavate to get people out. As I speak to you, there are several people who are still trapped under the collapsed building, and we understand that they've been making contact with rescue officials via their telephone, and the rescue officials are trying to see how they can get to them. And we've spoken with a few witnesses who have told us that as much as 13 bodies were recovered all through the night up to this morning. 13 bodies have been recovered, and that's what eyewitnesses are telling us, even though the police did say that there are 3 people who have been confirmed dead, and several other people have also been injured. Some of them are critical, and they've been taken to the Bingham University Teaching Hospital, where they are receiving medical attention. But rescue operations are ongoing at the moment, just trying to see how they can get as much people they can to rescue from the rubble.
Samson Omale joining us there on the line from Jos. The World Health Organization's Emergency Committee is set to convene for the 4th time to decide whether the Ebola outbreak in the DRC constitutes an international health emergency. The World Health Organization's Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the confirmation of a new case in Goma is a game changer. The UN is also asking the international community to increase funding to support the response. CGTN's Amy McNaugh reports.
Residents of Goma City are on edge as reports of the first case of Ebola hit home. A priest who had interacted with Ebola patients while on a mission in Butemo, in North Kivu province, is the victim.
When I heard the disease was in Goma, I was shaken and scared, and that's why I won't stop washing and sanitizing my hand so that I can protect myself from the disease.
With regards to the disease, there is a lot of information that is going around the city, but we still do not have sufficient information. But to my knowledge, Ebola is a reality that people should understand and adopt preventive measures that are communicated to us by the relevant services in this area.
In Geneva, the World Health Organization has also been reacting to the latest developments in DRC. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus said the organization will soon convene an emergency meeting on the best ways of combating the spread of Ebola outside North Kivu and Ituri provinces, where the disease has been concentrated.
Together, we will end this outbreak, but unless we address its root causes, the weaker system, the insecurity and the political instability, there will be another outbreak. we often talk about the need to bridge the humanitarian development nexus. This is the moment to practice what we preach.
The announcement came after the WHO chief chaired a meeting with stakeholders in the Ebola response in DRC. DRC's Minister of Health, Dr. Oli Lunga, also attended the meeting.
Just when we start to get control of the virus in one area, it appears in another. And violence and insecurity continue to undermine the response. We're dealing with one of the world's most dangerous viruses in one of the world's most dangerous areas.
WHO has already warned that if Ebola takes root in the densely populated city of Goma, it will deal a severe blow to intervention efforts and increase the risk of spreading to neighboring Rwanda. Rwanda has already issued a travel advisory on its citizens against visiting the lake city of Goma and the entire Democratic Republic of Congo. Amy McConaughey, CGTN.
Well, let's get you more on that situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa is live for us in the capital, Kinshasa. Chris, can you give us more details on this latest Ebola case in Goma? We understand the infected person has died.
Well, I spoke to the communications officer of the World Health Organization, and he said that information is not correct. The patient has been sent to Butembo, where there are better health facilities, and the health workers are doing their best to try and keep him alive. And so that is what we have got about the patient. He hasn't died yet.
So Chris, this is really a worrying situation given that Goma is quite a populated area. How successful have authorities been in tracing those that might have come into contact with him?
Well, the authorities say they have identified all the people who traveled with the pastor in the bus, and they started vaccinating them yesterday. I think there were about 60 people who they have identified, and they're also carrying out more vaccinations around the Goma to ensure that the disease doesn't spread further. They've also put in place a number of water points where people can disinfect their hands to ensure that, you know, they end this outbreak. They don't want it to spread in Goma because it's densely populated and it's a very busy commercial hub that can present problems not just to the DRC but the region as a whole.
So clearly the health authorities there have taken precautions, Chris, but the World Health Organization says the case in Goma is a potential game changer. What's been the reaction to this in the DRC?
Well, some of the people I've spoken to feel that the words of the WHO are alarmist because, you know, authorities in the DRC said that they quickly identified and isolated the patient, and so the risk of the disease spreading is very low. But the World Health Organization, like you mentioned, said that this is a game changer because the risk of it spreading is very high. And actually, the WHO Director General said he's going to convene a meeting to decide whether this constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. So there is kind of a contradiction. The local authorities here are saying, look, there's no need for people to panic, there's no cause for alarm, but the World Health Organization are saying, no, this might, you know, lead to more problems in the DRC and the region as a whole. And so the reaction here has been, well, people are quite disappointed with what the words of officials from the World Health Organization have said.
Chris Ochamringa joining us there from the capital, Kinshasa. Let's now go to a neighboring Uganda, where the country is struggling to contain the number of refugees coming into the country since the beginning of the month, following a resurgence of violence in eastern DRC's Ituri province. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says that more than 7,000 people have so far arrived in Uganda's southwestern district of Hoima since the start of June. CGTN's Daniel Arap is in Hoima and brings us more in this report.
Renewed clashes between opposing Hema and Lendo groups in northeastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo are driving hundreds of people across the border into Uganda at a rate of 310 a day, more than double the rate of refugee arrivals in May, which stood at 145 per day. Jackie Nyakofa is a 46-year-old mother of 6. She fled the DRC 2 days ago. Nyakofa speaks of extreme brutality by armed groups and indiscriminate killings.
We fled Congo because of the war. The war has intensified. There is no peace. And there is a lot of killings, so we decided to run to Uganda.
Jackie Nyakofa, who fled imminent danger in DRC, has little more than the clothes on her back. Jackie Anijo is another refugee who fled her home this month when men with machetes attacked their village in the Democratic Republic of the Congo's Ituri province. She says her 5 children were killed by the militia, leaving her desperate with no hope for a better future.
We ran into the bush and that is how we survived. A good Samaritan later picked us and that is how we survived the wrath of the land.
Some of the refugees are reportedly being prevented from leaving DRC by armed groups, while others struggle to afford the fee for the dangerous boat journey, a sum equivalent to less than $6. Most people are fleeing to Uganda via Lake Albert from Ituri province, where displacement since early June is now estimated at 5,896. Shelter and basic relief items are the urgent priority. Those that have arrived are being transported from Sebagoro landing site to the reception centers and eventually to settlement areas allocated by the Ugandan government. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Sebagoro, Hoima District, Uganda.
South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma will spend his second day before the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo today. On Monday, the former president faced questions about his links to the Gupta family and their influence on his presidency. Angelo Coppola tells us more.
Ex-President Jacob Zuma spent the morning providing context to Deputy Chief Justice Zondo and insights into what he claims was a concerted effort to discredit him and remove him from office dating back to 1990, and was driven by 2 foreign intelligence services and a South African intelligence service.
There has been a drive to remove me from the scene, a wish that I should disappear. This conspiracy against me has been stretched at all material times when there are things to be done or said.
During his testimony on day 1, Zuma says that in the interest of unity, he didn't divulge information about what certain of his colleagues were doing.
I think one of the key takeaways for me was Jacob Zuma coming out, telling the entire country that he knows about things that his comrades have done wrong. And he's kept quiet about it for more than 28 years without letting the country know. That in and of itself is unacceptable. We have the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act in South Africa, which says that if you know that someone has committed a crime or is involved in corruption, you're obliged to inform officials.
Zuma supporters within the ANC welcomed the ex-president's appearance at the Zondo Commission.
One of the things we must do is to congratulate President Zuma for agreeing to come to the commission to educate South Africa and the rest of the world that no one is above the law. He has subjected himself to this. That's good for South Africa. It's very important.
The main opposition party says Zuma's testimony shows that it's not just the ex-president who has to answer for state capture.
An entire party that was complicit in the selling and buying off of, or the attempted selling and buying off of the entire country. Jacob Zuma was just the catalyst that was used as for ease of sale.
The ruling party is taking a different view, though.
So we need to think beyond the Zondo Commission and not be absorbed by developments of the moment. Because some of the people are so absorbed by development of the moments and they forget that there's tomorrow.
Day 1 of ex-President Jacob Zuma's testimony has come to an end, premature end it must be said, and we look forward to some more clarification over the next 3 days. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And staying in South Africa, where dozens of people were murdered in gang-infested areas in the Western Cape province in the past 24 hours, despite heavy police presence. Western Cape Premier Alan Wind says A total of 43 murders were recorded by forensic services over the weekend. Of the 43 people murdered, 25 were shot and 12 were stabbed with a sharp object. For more on this, I'm now joined by Gebrand van Heeden, an analyst and researcher at the Center of Risk Analysis within the Institute of Race Relations. Thank you for joining us there, Hayden. Let's start off with what's just happened, though. It was another bloody weekend in Cape Town, despite the looming deployment of troops. Why the sudden spike in violence?
Yes, so violent crime has been a problem in South Africa for decades, and we've actually seen a steady rise in crime in the last 5 to 6 years. And even though crime is a national problem in this country, it is a particular problem in Cape Town. Cape Town is the metropolitan city with the highest murder rate, and what is mainly driving that high murder rate is the problem with gangsterism. And what we've seen is that South Africa is planning to deploy the army to combat gangsterism in South Africa, but this in itself is not a useful way to deal with the problem. The reason why we've seen such a bloody weekend occur in Cape Town in the last few days is because gang leaders, I think, do not feel intimidated by the army being deployed to the city, because what the army will essentially do is deal with the foot soldiers of these gangs in and around the city. However, many of the key gang leaders who control the gangs in Cape Town do not live within the city itself. They live in other parts of the country, and they even are located outside of South Africa's borders. So in essence, the army will be dealing with foot soldiers, but not with the gang leaders themselves that are driving these gangs to terrorize these communities. I also think that another reason why these gang leaders do not feel intimidated by an upcoming army coming their way is because deploying an army to deal with gangsterism isn't a new initiative. We've seen this happened in other parts of the world, such as Brasilia, in a case in Brasilia where the army was deployed to deal with gangs. Right. As time went on, the army officials started working with the gang leaders instead of protecting the community against the gang leaders. So corruption is also an avenue that gang leaders are thinking about in order to woo army officials to their side. We've also seen the army being deployed in Cape Town in 2015, and that also didn't work well, because once the army retracted, gang violence just resumed.
So, Gebrand, I do want to find out from you, because you do mention that the deployment of soldiers to do community policing may not be effective in South Africa's case, unlike in other countries. So, in your opinion, though, what can be done to effectively deal with this issue of gun violence? And why exactly is there a large number of gangsterism in South Africa?
Yes, so I think the reason why gang activity has increased so drastically in the last few years in Cape Town is because of a huge inflow of illicit guns and drugs coming into the city from other markets, international markets. And that's because this inflow goes unchecked, unregulated, and that is why we believe at the CRA that deploying the army will only be effective in dealing with the symptoms, but not with the root causes of gangsterism. Gangsterism has been allowed to flourish in the city because of a breakdown of chain in command in the police forces, because of corruption, because of political appointments that have incapacitated the police. So if we don't deal with those with the breakdown in the police force, then deploying the army will just serve as a temporary solution. Once the army withdraws, these gang activities will only come back stronger, as we've seen in the Westbury case last year in Johannesburg in 2018. Also, structural issues such as poverty, unemployment, and inequality is rife within the marginalized communities in Cape Town. And this creates a wonderful environment for gangs to incorporate and recruit young, disenfranchised youth that have no hopes for a future. So dealing with those structural issues should be prioritized first.
Gerbrand van Heeden joining us there from Johannesburg. Thank you for your update. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. South Africa and the DPRK pledge to strengthen relations. And global hunger continues to rise. That's according to the latest report by the United Nations.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa and South Korea have pledged to strengthen and intensify working relations between the two countries. South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, on Monday met with her counterpart, Kang Kyung-hwa. Several bilateral and multilateral issues of mutual interest were discussed. CGTN's Lisa Njamela has more.
The Republic of Korea is South Africa's fourth largest trading partner in Asia, and South Africa is that country's largest trading partner here in Africa. South Africa and the Republic of Korea enjoy well-established bilateral relations since diplomatic ties were cemented way back in 1992. The two countries cooperate in a wide range of areas managed through a structured bilateral mechanism. In 2018, South Africa's total volume of bilateral trade with the Republic of Korea stood at approximately 37 billion rand, with South African exports at 23 billion rand and imports at 14 billion rand. This meeting is meant to further strengthen bilateral engagements, especially economically.
Korea is admired for a number of areas of success, including education, innovation, and telecommunications and the automotive sector. So I'm really hoping that through our interaction, we will be able to play a role in strengthening relations between our country, its government, and of course the people of both South Africa and Korea.
The status of bilateral relations between the two countries, trade and investment, technical cooperation, Korea-Africa development issues, and other global affairs are among the issues discussed by the two leaders here.
We also have a lot to learn, and we have your spirit of inclusiveness as the Rainbow Nation has always been an inspiration to us as we try to make our democracy more innovative and inclusive. My president, a key word in his governing philosophy is inclusiveness, because we realize as we sought economic development, we had been rather less than focused on the inclusive side of things.
The foreign minister is expected to pay a working visit to other African countries as well. Yudison Jamela for CGTN, Johannesburg in South Africa.
Well, that was South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, meeting with her South Korean counterpart, Kang Kyung-hwa. Let's now go to Somalia, where authorities in Kismayo say the security forces in the region will increase operations ahead of regional polls next month. This comes amid frosty relations between Mogadishu and Kismayo over the venue for the upcoming polls. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports now on how Friday's attack has affected the relatively stable region of southern Somalia.
Life is back to normal in this city just 3 days after a deadly terrorist attack claimed close to 30 lives. But the horrors of Friday's attack still haunt many. This is what's left of SSA Hotel after a car bomb detonated inside the hotel, followed by a 10-hour gun battle between security forces and several insurgents. Kismayo is due to host regional elections next month, and campaign is already in top gear ahead of the planned polls. Among those killed in the attack include clan elders and a presidential candidate who used the hotel as his campaign headquarters. Local authorities now warn against politicizing security.
As a regional administration, we are against any and all efforts to compromise security. Let us not mix politics and security. It's for this reason that the Regional Security Council has given a new mandate to security forces until elections are held.
For close to 8 years, Al-Shabaab was unable to launch attacks inside Kismayo. In 2012, regional forces backed by Kenyan troops overpowered the militant group to retake Kismayo, denying the group its financial lifeline. Al-Shabaab mostly relied on this spot for illegal charcoal export to sustain its operations. One of the 4 attackers has since been arrested. The gunmen disguised as police before storming the hotel in downtown Kismayo, raising security concerns as to how the militant group was able to obtain government-issued uniform.
This was the biggest security breach in Kismayo in the past 8 years. Therefore, we expect close security cooperation with members of the public to ensure that similar attack doesn't happen.
Ahmed Mohamed Islam, the current regional leader, is seeking re-election and is facing increased opposition from other candidates. Meanwhile, Mogadishu insists that the elections must take place in a secure venue, most preferably the airport compound that serves as a base for the United Nations and African Union troops AMISOM. Tension between Mogadishu and Kismayo has been on the rise in recent months. The two have differed on policy regarding resource sharing, appointment of regional security chiefs, and the upcoming elections. It's unclear whether the latest attack will change the working relations between the two, but experts warn that Al-Shabaab likely to remain the main beneficiary if the status quo remains the same. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
World hunger is still a growing issue according to the latest figures from the United Nations. More than 820 million struggled last year to find enough food to eat, an increase on 2017's figures. CGTN's Nick Harper reports from New York.
Hunger has now risen around the world for the last 3 years running. It jumped from 811 million in 2017 to 820 million last year. The report, officially called the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, is a collection of data from various UN agencies, including the World Food Programme, UNICEF and the World Health Organization. The situation in Africa is said to be the most alarming. More than 250 million people on the continent are deemed by the UN as being hungry. It has the highest rates of hunger in the world, and it is, the UN says, slowly but steadily rising in almost all African sub-regions. In East Africa, for example, nearly a third of the population is now undernourished. Overall, more than a quarter of the world's population, that's 2 billion people, are considered by the UN to be moderately or severely food insecure. The report also found the pace of progress is too slow when it comes to reducing the number of children who are stunted. The same goes for babies, 1 in 7 of whom are born with a low birth weight. The report is also used as a way to assess the Sustainable Development Goal of achieving zero hunger by 2030. The UN admits the latest data suggests there's still a lot of work to do, saying that goal is an immense challenge. Adding to the nutrition challenge, the report found that overweight and obesity levels continue to rise in all regions around the world. The UN says the report makes it clear that actions to tackle these trends will have to be bolder. Nick Harper, CGTN, New York.
China's 22nd Peacekeeping Engineer Detachment's unit is in Walungu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The town is a few kilometers away from the Chinese peacekeepers' camp in Bukavu. In May of this year, the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo gave an order to Chinese peacekeeping engineers to repair the road from the Nepalese peacekeeping infantry camp to Kinshasa. This road is located in the area where militants, robbers and anti-government forces are extremely active. Some road sections only allow one vehicle to barely pass, and the jungle is covered all along the way.
We received an urgent order from MONUSCO to repair the road between the Nepal peacekeepers camp and Kashanja in Walungu. The road is the only one for local people to transport supplies and for the Nepal peacekeepers to patrol. Damaged seriously during the rainy season, the materials could only be transported by helicopters. MONUSCO ordered us to complete the repairing task in 40 days so as to get through this critical path as soon as possible. We overcame difficulties of the harsh natural environment and the shortage of pavement materials. We worked on the spot every day and finally completed the task 10 days in advance.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in your business news. Zimbabweans decry the rising cost of living in the country after the rate of inflation doubled in June. And financial and technology experts from Africa and Asia converge in Nairobi to seek areas of collaboration.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Annual inflation in Zimbabwe for the month of June has almost doubled to nearly 176% compared to about 98% in May. This is the highest inflation rate in the Southern African economy since hyperinflation forced the government to abandon the Zimbabwe dollar in 2009. CGTN's Noel Mwakugu explains.
Zimbabwe has gone from deflation to triple-digit inflation in less than 3 years. According to its statistics office, last month's annual inflation surged to about 178% compared to 98% in May. The Southern African nation is currently in the midst of a worsening economic crisis. The prices of food, clothing, furniture and healthcare are all rocketing, increasing by more than 200%.
I think it's also making us a less consumptive population, because now you have to really see what is necessary. Do I need this? Maybe not.
In attempts to fix this, last month the government scrapped the use of the multi-currency regime and introduced the Zimbabwean dollar as its sole legal tender. But the market continues to be skeptical about the currency. It's stoking fears of a return of hyperinflation that wiped out savings 10 years ago when the economy collapsed.
Life is becoming tougher for us because we do not have any money to buy diesel, and the price increase means only those who are rich can afford to buy it.
People are buying, especially those who want to cook for their family. They come to buy a small bottle of cooking oil to last 2 or 3 days while they look for more money.
Hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans have fled abroad in the last 20 years. Many others are now seeking to leave the country as conditions worsen under President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa promised an economic revival after succeeding long-ruling Robert Mugabe in 2017. But the economy continues to decline further, shattering living standards of millions of residents. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta says his country will continue to leverage on new technologies to deepen financial inclusion. The head of state made the remarks at this year's ongoing Afro-Asia FinTech Festival in the capital, Nairobi. The inaugural two-day event is the first of its kind in the region. It brings together delegates from across Asia and Africa to explore a platform for connections, collaborations, and exchange of ideas in the area of FinTech. Kenya has grown significantly in technology and is seen as a lucrative market for fintechs. Last year, two Kenyan companies, Cellulant and Tala, emerged among the top 50 emerging fintech companies in the world.
When what became M-Pesa was brought to the Central Bank of Kenya around 2005, it was little more than a class project. The consumer's problem and how it would be resolved was clear. However, over the next year and a half, the innovators collaborated closely with the regulator, committed to reducing the risks to the financial system and to the consumer. Once these risks had been addressed sufficiently, a test and learn approach was adopted when it was introduced in the market. And that is why M-Pesa has been such a success. Don't be in a rush for success, and please take time to do things right.
Access to financial services in Kenya has more than tripled from 26% in 2006 to 82% in 2019. More importantly, mobile phone financial services have lifted thousands of Kenyans out of poverty and enhanced their livelihoods. We are scoring astounding accomplishments as a result of FinTech. Technology-driven financial inclusion is not a success story that is limited to Kenya alone, but rather one which is evidenced in every other African country. All African countries have driven transformation of their financial inclusion landscape by leveraging on mobile phone technology in one way or another. Indeed, Africa has one of the fastest growing mobile phone adoption and penetration rates globally.
Africa's most populous country may soon get its own airline. Ethiopian Airlines has revealed it has been meeting with Nigerian government officials as well as the private sector for collaboration opportunities. This brings back to life a plan that was scrapped last year. CGTN's Philly has a report from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
The new airline, Nigeria Air, was due to start operations in December of 2018, but the government suspended plans to launch the project in September 2018 after a cabinet meeting disapproved the launch because the government did not have the resources to fund it. The country's former Minister of State for Aviation, Hadi Sirika, had unveiled a new name and logo at an air show in London 3 months before the suspension. The Nigerian government has now revived talks with private investors, local airlines and Ethiopian Airlines to help manage the project. Nigeria's previous national airline, Nigerian Airways, was founded in 1958, but it collapsed 14 years ago. Nigerian aviation experts say a national carrier operating on the international stage could have a huge impact on the country's economy.
We are eagerly waiting for it because it will create jobs for our engineers, for our pilots that doesn't exist right now. Since Nigerian Airways left, no any airline has been able to train Nigerians. We used to export engineers and pilots to other parts of the world before. Now, no more. Things have changed because there's no national carrier. These are some of the advantages.
Experts say for this attempt to bring back a national airline to be successful, it will require a major financial commitment from the government.
If the government put in, even if it's $2 billion to start a new national carrier through PPP or whatever you call it, if those variables are not looked into, world-class maintenance, cost of aviation fuel, cost of training, cost of catering, and so on and so forth, trust me, the national carrier will still go down.
According to the country's aviation ministry, the government plans to invest about $5 million into the new national airline with a maximum stake of 5%. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
More than 2 weeks after the suicide bombings in downtown Tunis, Tunisia's tourism revenues have edged up in comparison with the same period last year. Authorities are seeking to attract Chinese travelers and tourists from classical European markets as a top priority in the next few months. Adnan Chauchi tells us more.
René Trabilsi is the Minister of Tourism in Tunisia. He has made great effort to restore the image of the tourism sector in the North African country following the recent terror attacks in Tunis. Now he's confident that Tunisia will attract over 9 million tourists this year.
Life goes on even after this crisis, which happens in any country in the world. There are no booking cancellations. The occupancy rate at hotels reached nearly 100%. We'll reach our target of 9 million tourists and even more.
The minister added that Tunisia can welcome over 100,000 Chinese tourists who visit the country to discover its rich civilization, history, and millennial historic sites.
I'm very optimistic about the Chinese market. I've had meetings with travel agencies and businessmen from China. Chinese clients are enthusiastic about visiting Tunisia. The Rome Carthage excursion is a fantastic program for Chinese travelers.
According to the Ministry of Tourism and Handicrafts, the number of tourists in Tunisia hit about 3.8 million peak late June. That is up 16.7% compared with the same period last year, while tourism revenues edged up 42.5%. The traditional European markets have also chosen Tunisia as a tourist destination for its proximity and the service quality. Audrey is a French tourist who's visiting the Hammamet beach resort for the first time.
My grandparents have been visiting this tourist resort for the past 18 years. They praised the good conditions, so I decided to come to Tunisia for holidays. I'm discovering Tunisia. It's a cool experience.
Tunisian authorities have tightened up the security measures in all regions across the country. No travel bans have been issued for tourists who plan to visit this North African and Mediterranean destination. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the Trump administration is concerned that the new digital currency planned by Facebook could be used for illicit activity such as money laundering, human trafficking and financing terrorism. The head of the Federal Reserve also raised an alarm about the plan last week. Congress begins hearings on Facebook's Libra plan this Tuesday.
We obviously have concerns with the privacy issues. There's been items in the press about potential settlements. I'm not going to comment on that. But obviously, the regulators, and one of the regulators, as I've said, most people haven't heard on FinCEN. So one of the reasons I wanted to explain this is whether they're banks or whether they're non-banks, they're under the same regulatory environment for FinCEN, and we will hold them accountable. And they're going to have to convince us of very high standards before they have access to the U.S. financial system.
Telecom equipment maker Huawei says it will invest $3.1 billion in Italy over the next 3 years. The Chinese company's Italian unit CEO, Thomas Miao, said in Milan that the investment would create 1,000 new jobs. Local media reported Monday that the investment would include $1.2 billion for operations and marketing and $1.9 billion for direct supplies. In addition, $52 million would go for research and development. Huawei employs about 850 people in Italy and opened new headquarters in Milan earlier this year. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Tanzania's annual Haba na Haba Dance Festival is back again with brand new performances.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Tanzania is trying to improve its dance skills by making the art more culturally appreciated. Dar es Salaam's yearly Haba na Haba Dance Festival aims to train local dancers by connecting them with professional international artists. The festival, which has been running since 2011, feels it's taking a step in the right direction, as CGTN's Daniel Kijo reports.
Controlling their bodies and stepping towards better movement, these dancers are hoping to improve not only their individual skills, but also the appreciation of dance in the country. The three-day affair brings together traditional and contemporary performances from local and international artists and dance groups.
So this idea is to start a festival, dance festival, whereby we encourage ourselves every day to build our dance scene, where the contemporary dancers and choreographers and traditional dancers and choreographers can share their work and can bring the audience together and the community to unite and celebrate the power of our culture.
The festival aims to bring contemporary dance to new audiences within the local community, providing professional training to local dancers and celebrate contemporary dance in Tanzania. Haba na Haba means slowly but surely in Swahili. In its third edition, this year's show aims to promote local dancers by connecting them to professionals in workshops, and later they get to showcase those new skills on stage. The show this year is supported by the Swiss Embassy, the Goethe Institute, Nafasi Art Space, and the Pro Helvetia from South Africa, with support from Basata Arts Council Tanzania.
So the cultural scene is very small, and when new things develop, it's quite naturally that all partners come together and try to make it a success. Because apart from us, there is no official support.
Professional dancers Musa Haltwayo from South Africa and Maura Morales from Germany have been coaching the dancers on creating their own identity. Happiness is a Tanzanian dancer who's been dancing for over 3 years. She says it is a career that can be challenging.
As a dancer, professional dancer, to really have your own space and your own audience is really a privilege, and Haba na Haba has done a great job. Yeah, I'm proud of Haba na Haba.
Organizers say Tanzania has a long way to go in progressing dance as an art form compared with other African countries. But through this yearly festival, they hope dancers and fans will be inspired to keep appreciating the power of dance. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. The video assistant referee makes a debut at the Africa Cup of Nations with no major complaints so far.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And And we begin with African football. Algeria's qualification for the Africa Cup of Nations final was celebrated in a great festive atmosphere in Algeria and in France. Riyad Mahrez's last-minute free kick brought about an explosion of joy in homes and Algerian streets. The goal sent the Desert Foxes into their first final in 29 years, and shouts of joy across the North African country were widely spread. But the celebrations were not only in Algeria. Algerians thronged the streets of Paris, celebrating the results, with women, men and children coming out to celebrate the victory of the Phoenix against the Super Eagles.
We won the game and qualified for the finals of the Africa Cup of Nations. I cannot describe my feelings and the joy. I'm the happiest person today.
The players have had a very good match. We have not seen such a strong team for many years, and thank God we are in the final.
Meanwhile, Nigeria, Senegal and Ghanaian fans have given this year's Africa Cup of Nations a joyful and melodious touch. Hundreds of fans have turned match venues into festive sites as they filled Egyptian streets with traditional music, song and dance. There may not be so many of them yet. Their touch has been remarkable throughout the tournament. Draped in their respective country flags, the fans have lit up the stadiums with song and dance before, during and after matches, bringing a different sound to Egyptian streets. Trumpets, drums and vuvuzelas have been making the tunes as the fans chant in the streets and stadiums, bringing each nation's culture to Africa's grandest sports event.
Egyptian people love Nigeria so much.
And we love them also.
Are you getting me? And we love them so much. We are not happy when they lost to this South African. We love Egyptian. They are very accommodative. So we have a lot of Nigeria. Are you getting me? Here in Egypt. So they are very accommodative. They are very good people here. So they support us, we support them.
We've been to 2 Senegal games and they've both been great. It's been a lot of fun being with the Senegalese fans. The Senegalese side is pretty good. I think it's a pretty good turnout given the fact that it's on the other side of the continent from here. So yeah, it's yeah, we are enjoying the competition.
And starting from the quarterfinals, CAF has introduced a video assistant referee. It is the first time VAR has come to use at the Africa Cup of Nations. The technology has so far been of help to the referees and also to several teams. South Africa got a goal awarded against Nigeria after the referees had earlier cancelled the score as it was considered offside. The technology was used at the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia with lots of criticism from football fans who claimed that the decisions were affecting the speed and tempo of the game. The complaints have been the same from the fans, but the officials, the players and the coaches have so far not had a major complaint on the use of the video assistant referee.
Yes, it was useful. We were a little afraid that the VAR will go too far. That's because it's a new toy. But we exaggerate things. I did not see the match from the preview, but I think it was used very well.
Il n'y a pas eu d'exagération, j'ai pas vu le match d'avant et les matchs d'avant, mais
I have to be, no, I have to be. So, but I think you get these a run of games that you score in the first minute or the last minute. And I don't think it's a tournament, as I say. So maybe we know that in the game of football, goals are scored in critical phases of the game.
Former